Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast with your host, Gui Kostin. The goal of this podcast is to give listeners a unique look into sales strategies from top industry executives. We introduce you to the heads of sales and heads of distribution who will help you understand the inner workings of the successful sales organizations from philosophy to execution. This podcast is essential for sales professionals seeking wisdom from the best in the field. If you're not familiar with Dakota and their Dakota Rainmaker content, please check out dakota.com to learn more about their services.
This episode is brought to you by Dakota Marketplace. Are you tired of constantly jumping between multiple databases and channels to find the right investment opportunities? Introducing Dakota Marketplace, the comprehensive institutional and intermediate database built by fundraisers for fundraisers. With Dakota Marketplace, you'll have access to all channels and asset classes in one place, saving you time and streamlining your fundraising process. Say goodbye to the frustration of searching through multiple databases, websites, Form ADVs, and say hello to a seamless and efficient fundraising experience. Sign up now and see the difference Dakota Marketplace can make for you. Visit dakota.com/Dakota-Marketplace today. What's up, everybody? Gui Kostin, founder and CEO of Dakota. Welcome to the latest edition of the Rainmaker Podcast. I am joined by Jeff Carlin, CFA, and Senior Managing Director, Head of Global Wealth Advisory at Nuveen. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Gui. Glad to be here.
So thrilled to have you. This is going to be great. So Jeff is a Senior Managing Director, Head of Global Wealth Advisory Services at Nuveen, and a member of the senior leadership team. He is responsible for leading the placement, distribution, and support of all products through U.S. Wealth Distribution Channel. Jeff is also a member of the Nuveen Business Leadership Team, which directs overall strategy, leads firm initiatives, and is accountable for the business results of our combined product and distribution teams, working closely with Nuveen affiliates to support and execute our collective goals. Jeff has held various roles at Nuveen, including Head of Distribution for Structured Products and National Sales Manager for the Wirehouse and Private Wealth channels. Prior to joining the firm, Jeff was a National Sales Manager for IndexIQ, a leading innovator of alternative investment ETFs. Before that, he was responsible for the managed accounts business at Charles Schwab & Company, and a regional director in Northern California for Smith Barney's consulting group. Jeff graduated with a BS in administration with an emphasis in finance and real estate from San Diego State University. He's a current member of the Money Management Institute and is a member of the Board of Governors. He is also a member of the Investment Management Consultants Association and was a member of the Board of Directors from 2008 to 2011. He holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation and is a member of the CFA Institute. Let's get into it, but I'd love, as we talk about, I'd love to hear about your background, dating back to kind of where you grew up in college and go through your career and what led up to Nuveen.
Sure. So I'm born and raised San Franciscan. Not many of us still around, but
now what part of San Francisco?
I grew up on the west side of San Francisco, out by the Olympic Club and the
really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the favorite spots of all time, right? I mean, the ocean there.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
There's some great golf and great people. Real blue collar, neighborhood. A lot of first generation Americans, quite frankly. A lot of my friends, their parents came from Ireland, from Italy, from other places, Asia. My parents, my dad was a first generation American. So a real big melting pot type of community.
What's the name of that town? West
Portal.
West Portal.
Yeah.
West
I grew
Portal.
up 2 blocks from West Portal.
Okay, got it. Because I did all this for my career, 5 years, Starbucks locations in the mid-90s.
Oh, yeah.
All Northern California.
Yeah. Well, that Starbucks on by Senny and West Portal is a very popular Starbucks for sure.
That's a great area.
So grew up there. Went to school. I was a product of the parochial school system. Went to an all-boys Catholic high school. Many of my friends are friends that were at the other competing schools and things like that. But then went to school down in Southern California. Went to San Diego State. Cut my teeth down with the Aztecs down on Montezuma Mesa. And really, my degree was in finance, but with a focus on real estate. I wanted to get into the commercial real estate market and business. A lot of my friends were developers and things like that. Their parents were. And that's what I thought I wanted to do. And we graduated in the early 90s, and the kind of S&L crisis kind of made that not to be a good decision. So I took the first job I could get working at State Street Bank and Trust as a fund accountant. I realized pretty quickly that my life wasn't meant to be behind a screen looking at numbers and all that. And I got a job out of the newspaper, of all things, to work for Smith Barney's consulting group.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I really felt like I started my career. I had a job before that, but I got introduced to a great mentor who kind of mentored me for the next 30 years of my life, Jeff Cusack. And ultimately, that's what led me to be able to kind of grow in this business.
That's amazing. So if you go back that far, I mean, that Bob Shear, wasn't he part of that?
Absolutely.
He's a dear friend.
Yeah. The consulting group was amazing. I mean, it was this small organization inside of Smith Barney. Smith Barney at that time had just combined with Shearson Lehman, about 18 months before. And institutional consulting was becoming more mainline. It was becoming more for the high net worth investor as opposed to the small to medium sized institutional investor. And I equate that to the private markets today. I mean, it's kind of a similar path that, what once was for the institutions, i.e., private markets, is now for the high net worth and the wealth advisor. And I think it's the parallels are pretty amazing, quite frankly.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, but so I had a great time there, really learned a lot, had a great opportunity. And then I moved over to Schwab. And Schwab in 2002 was, already evolving to be a advice organization. Prior to 2000, they didn't provide any advice inside their retail organization, but their RIA business was big and growing, but it was nothing which it is today. And at the same time, we're starting to see at the early days there are a lot of advisors leaving the big brokerage firms and going independent. And that transformation, I happened to be a part of that when I was at Schwab. And then I got lured to the startup world. I did an ETF startup for 18 months. I call it a sabbatical because I didn't make a lot of money and I worked really hard, but I learned a ton.
What was it called?
It was called IndexIQ. It was great. The founders, Adam Patty and David Fogel, still really great friends of mine. They ultimately sold the business to New York Life a couple years after I left, but it was a great experience. It was something that I wouldn't change for the world because I learned a lot about what it means to start, to work at the very much the front end of something when you really have no resources and you have to kind of use all of your, capabilities to get things done. And then I got lured to come join Nuveen. Nuveen was looking to.
And what year was this?
This was 2010. So July 1st of 2010 is when I started at Nuveen. So I'm coming up on 15 years here at Nuveen.
Well, congrats.
Yeah, it's been a great run. Another major transformations happened at Nuveen since I've been there. But I was brought in to run the RIA business for Nuveen, and soon thereafter I was asked to run all of the wire and RIA businesses. It was a great time. I mean, Nuveen at the time, we were privately owned. We were we had an LBO a couple years before by a buyout shop, and we were in the middle of trying to transform the business so that we could sell it to somebody else. And so it was a kind of a serial kind of reworking on the business and the model, what have you, and while at the same time witnessing what was happening in the wealth space. It was kind of very interesting. But then 2014 we get acquired by TIAA, and really for the next 6 years, from 2014 to really about 2019, 2020, it was reimagining what Nuveen is. Over that time, I had a number of roles, but in 2019 or 2018, I took over the whole P&L for the wealth business. Okay. And then in 2022, I was asked to take on the strategy and execution for all of our wealth outside the U.S. as well. Wow. So it's been a great run so far. There's a lot of great things happening, and I think there's a lot of room to grow, quite frankly.
So that's amazing. So you were at the epicenter, truly, as Nuveen in wealth,
yes.
Right? Which is obviously an explosion in the business, an explosion in private funds, just an explosion in just about everything around wealth, where more and more people need advice, growth, baby boomers, everything, Xers now, right? Just keeps growing and growing and growing. Walk us through now how your team is structured, because to me this is really fascinating in terms of the overall structure, because you obviously have I'd love to know numbers. You have a big platform. Mm-hmm. Right. And then we'll get into kind of what your secret sauce is of how you operate it.
Sure. Yeah. So for about a year and a half before I took over the P&L for all of wealth, I was asked to step into, we had a gentleman, Bob Kuppenheimer, who was retiring, who ran our closed-end fund business. And they asked me to kind of really be his, basically be his caddy for a year and a half to learn and really build all the relationships with all of our distribution partners. So I kind of stepped away from running day-to-day the salespeople. And I took on that responsibility. We were building an ETF business, so I took on that responsibility. And then we bought and ultimately divested a UIT business, so I took on that responsibility as well. And so what that 18-month period gave me was the opportunity to just look and see how we were operating as a sales organization, because I was now not responsible for the day-to-day actions. I was just an observer, thinking about bringing our products to them and making sure that they were distributing them the right way.
So give us a few key takeaways, just because that's one of the great things to be able to do is look outside.
Yeah, I feel like it was the most fortunate situation to be in, because at first I was obviously, I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm a sales guy. I want to be with the salespeople, but then I was able to kind of sit back and like watch and think about the business a lot more, and then observe how we were operating. And a couple things popped up. Was that we had an IBD channel, we had a wire channel, we had a private wealth channel, and we had an RA channel. They all operated differently. They all thought about their markets differently. They all put together different business plans. In some cases, they competed against each other for talent inside the organization and for resources inside the organization. And so, that was something that kind of really sat with me. It's like, well, we can't have, if we're going to try to be one firm coming to the advisors, we can't be 4 different organizations going to market. So that was one observation. I think a second observation was, when I was looking at what the advisors were telling us, was they were changing rapidly. And remembering back in 2016, 17, 18, the idea of teams were growing a lot faster. Well, the large RIA segment was growing a lot faster too. And so those two things together, us looking at the market from the standpoint of where is the advisor associated with? Are they associated with a BD? Are they an SEC registered RIA? Versus how they're organized, what market they're going after, and how they want to be approached, really gave me a chance to really observe that and take a look at maybe there's a different way.
Yeah. So before you get into it, because I want to draw the corollary to software, because clearly with our database business, there's so much information around go-to-market strategies in SaaS and software, which is really now SaaS. And it's all about efficiencies and scale and systems, and not having all this, not creating, the investment management business is obviously a very profitable business with great recurring revenue. As I've always said, boutiques and every firm can fall prey to the high margins and recurring revenue, AKA we can make a ton of inefficient mistakes and waste a lot of money in distribution, because our margins, if we were selling steel, we wouldn't be having these you'd be nailing it like that, right? And so, but the best organizations are literally starting to look like and mimic what I'm seeing on the software side. I mean, there's literally I'll just say, there's 50 consultants out there that will consult to SaaS companies on their go-to-market strategies, GTM they call it, right? How many have you found in the investment management industry in wealth? Zero, right? They really know what they're talking about, zero, right? So you have to sort of either study those or invent it just by using common sense and just observation and what makes the most sense. So let's talk about what did you do? Because if you think about our audience here, it's not just big organizations, and it's people trying to figure out, how do I construct a sales team? What if I'm just a 1, 2, 3 person shop? Right? Efficiencies, scale, processes, systems, repeatability. Those are all the things that you're obviously going to go through, but that's where we are, right?
Well, yeah, I live in Northern California still. I'm surrounded by a lot of sales leaders who are on the tech and the SaaS world. So these are many of the people that I talk to, and I get their thoughts about what they do and how they do it, from not only from the leaders, but even the kids of my friends who get hired into tech. Tell me about the sales training you get, and tell me about the process you guys go through. And it's amazing how similar it is across many of those different verticals, and how different it is across ours. And we're all selling the same thing. We're all selling asset management, so it is pretty amazing. So I think that those processes and those that approach, that kind of reoccurring, repeatable way, is the only way a distribution organization can improve over time. There is no other way to do it. I kind of make the analogy. I know we use sports analogies all the time. Yeah. I like to use the jazz ensemble strategy, right? So a great jazz band is going to have one riff going through how they play, and then they're going to let all the players, kind of go off of that riff. And when they can do all that together, it's magical. It's great music, right? But you have to have that common denominator. You can't riff off of something that nobody else is understanding what you're riffing off of. Otherwise, it's just noise. It's a cacophony of sounds, right?
Right.
And I think, my observation when I was looking from the outside in of our own organization was we had some fantastic riffers. Like there's some beautiful musicians in the team, but they were all off doing their own thing all the time. And they were asking of the organization different things at different times. And the organization is just, flooding them with information. And so what it led to us to believe is that first and foremost, we need to start from the client back. Like what's the client doing and who do we want to work with? And what's the strategy? What is our addressable market? That's another thing that comes from the SaaS world is like, you have to have the right product market fit. You need to determine the right addressable market, and then you need a solid go-to-market strategy, right? It's kind of the three things you need 100%. To do. And so, looking back, I started thinking about things quite differently about how we operate and just asking questions like of our salespeople. When you think about the teams that really request your time, that really want you in their meetings, in their offices to get your opinion, describe to me what that looks like. And so they would describe, well, I'm on the advisory council for these 5 teams. All right, well, tell me, how did you get to become on the advisory council? Well, I'm there helping them make decisions about their firm and trying to help solve their problems. And I'm like, okay, that's a key word there. You're solving their problems. If we could focus on how we solve their problems more often, it might not always end with us selling them something, but more likely than not, if we're the ones solving their problems, they're going to start coming to us when they have problems. That's a very advantageous place to be. So we talk a lot about wanting to build indispensable partnerships. And if we have an indispensable partnership with an advisor, more likely we're going to be one of those 3 to 5 firms that they do the majority of their business with. And we might not win every mandate, but we're going to have more at-bats. And if we have more at-bats with the same batting average, we're still going to do pretty well. And if our batting average can go up because we have actually, operate in a really good way, well, then we're going to do quite well. So that's kind of like an underlying philosophy, strategy that I have and we have at Nuveen and how we operate.
Right. And so let's talk a little about sales process. But before we get there, you mentioned about the jazz band, right, and following. So I've found that if you as an organization, and it can be an organization of a sales team within a broad organization, if you have things that you stand for, right, ways of doing things. Yeah. Now, a lot of people call them core principles. Right. If you define ways of doing things and everyone buys into this is how we do things here, within our group, within our division, it can go broader and broader and broader. Right. The best idea is to have it come from the top when they establish it and then everyone buys in. Right. Then making decisions is easy. Well, here are our core principles. Yep. Does it align with this or not? If it doesn't, it's out. If it does, then this is the way we do things. Right. Which eventually gets into culture. Right. The word culture, right? Yep. But it's all about how we do things, right? This is how we do things here. Yep. And if you can do it where it's common sense, it's focused on the customer, it's solving the problem of the customer, and it's also, I hate to say it, in a very good way, I like salespeople who are prima donnas that ask for a lot because I like to give the salespeople everything they need. Mm-hmm. Then I sit back and say, okay, is there anything else you need? Right. And they're like, okay, no, I'm good. Okay, good. We're good now. Yeah, exactly. Let's go. So let's just run. Let's go execute, right? And let's just go execute. Yeah. Then you're not dealing with a lot of the internal, well, this, that, everything. People know the rules of the game. They have all the resources they need and they run. So as we get to kind of the next topic, as you talk about your team, can you talk about your team structure and then really how sales process, like how do you think about sales process as it relates to the team structure? Because clearly you went from 4 divisions or 5 and you did something to make things more consistent. Tell us about that. And really make sure I want to end on the key takeaway. Okay. Like at the end of the day, what ended up being the result, the harmony, to use your music example. Yeah.
So the first thing that we did was we kind of recognized that channelization is very, very valuable. Knowing all the nomenclature of your partner firm inside and out is valuable. Speaking their language of the advisor that you're working with is valuable. But at the same time, it comes with some cost. And when we started to look at the market and started to look at where advisors were and the concentration that was happening, because, this is not a derogatory statement, but there's been a big divide that's happened over the last decade, that the more enterprise-minded firms and advisors that are kind of building their own processes, that are putting divisions of labor in place, that are organizing themselves and knowing who their client is going after, are just growing a lot faster than the market is at large. So, no matter which study you look at, Cerulli or what have you, it's like a 10x CAGR on the top end of the market versus the market at large. So, you kind of have to look at that and say, well, something's happening there that we need to be cognizant of. And when we look at it, it's, all those things. They're complex organizations dealing with complex issues for their clients, and they have complex needs. And it doesn't matter who they're connected to, whether they're a massive team at Morgan Stanley in Midtown Manhattan, or whether they're a very large, multidisciplined RIA in the Midwest or what have you, or a large OSJ as part of connected to a big independent broker dealer. It doesn't matter who they are, what they're connected to, they're all operated at this level. And so if we looked at them to start and said, okay, well, where are they? And they're everywhere. They're in every market across the country. Right. But they're not dominated by one channel versus the other. Now, some channels, some groups tend to have higher average household size, but average household size doesn't determine how they operate. It's how they actually organize themselves, which is key. So we wanted to start there first. And
you started there first because those are the most valuable relationships?
They're the most valuable relationships. We just figured, like, if we could attach ourselves to the biggest, fastest growing advisors, then just by the nature, we should grow faster than the street broadly if we're just there. But if we can then actually add value, maybe we can grow exponentially faster still.
Okay, so we just have to take one pause.
Yeah.
There's a theory that we have, okay? And we call it channel focus. So, product structure equals channel focus.
Yeah.
So if you look at a mutual fund, RAs, separate accounts, RAs, right, if you will, some UMA.
Yeah.
Because they're the largest consumers. Banks, broker dealers have been traditionally the largest consumers of the mutual fund product structure.
Yeah.
Not saying they don't use separate accounts and ETFs and LPs. We got it. But let's just take one pause, because I think this was really important for our listeners, is that what you've done is we went through it quickly. You prioritized the best fit advisors that you want to call on, right? I just want to make sure we're clear that what you guys went about, because you went through it fast. You did, like, you assumed, but I want to make sure we're not dealing with assumptions, because the takeaway is, I think everyone has to prioritize who they're calling on, because everything's not created equally. And you can fall into the trap of what I tell the team all the time: we cannot be tripping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Right.
We got to pick up the dollars first, right, and then go down the line. So that's really what so I just want to make sure that we're very clear on what you just went through.
Right. We call it segmentation, and I know that's kind of normal. Like, with our segmentation is, that the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, it all applies, right? That 20% of the advisors are going to drive 80% of the business. So it's a math game in some degree from our standpoint, right? There's 350,000 registered reps and RIAs in our industry right now. Some would say, if you look at some of this early stuff, they're probably organized some way into about 200,000 teams. So there's the single person team, a matriarch or patriarch of the business and their assistant, and that's a team, versus multiple advisors, what have you, versus RIA firms. So we use the ubiquitous term buying unit just because, just try to kind of define it. So, if there's 200,000 buying units in the industry, and the 80-20 rule applies, well, then there's really 40,000 of them that are driving 80% of the business.
And your whole focus on what you just kind of went through, and I think this is the key takeaway, is that every business, every salesperson must prioritize who they're calling on.
Exactly.
And they have to call on the best fit, the biggest, who can give them the most amount of business to start, and then slowly just move down the line.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's what I really want to unpack, because that's really the key takeaway in terms of focus and prioritization of any sales organization.
Yep. The other thing that we overlaid on top of this, and this came from our real estate group. So our real estate group has done this study for the last decade around which cities do they want to invest in from a real estate perspective. And the idea is, there's these number of factors: growing population, dynamic workforces, and all these other things of where they want to invest. So we used a lot of that research to say, okay, if we looked across the US, this is specifically our US wealth distribution strategy, where are those cities in the US that are concentrated enough that we'd want to have our people have enough advisors and enough liquid net worth, all those things that would say we'd want to have our people physically located. And when it came down to, there was probably about 16 markets that really were concentrated enough, had enough net worth, and had an opportunity set large enough that we'd want to have physically located people. Outside of those 16 markets, probably, no matter where you were probably flying into that location on a regular basis. So we probably could then have those people be located anywhere, whether it's in a hub, in one of our hub locations, what have you. So when we, the example that we used of why channelization is so expensive is Los Angeles. So Los Angeles has everything, right? Lots of net worth, lots of advisors, and a relatively geographically dense location. I mean, if you go from downtown LA to Orange County, that's probably where the majority of it. If you put in San Diego and you put in Santa Barbara, you're a little further out.
So wait, you just said channelization's expensive.
Yeah.
Can I just relate that to a real world situation? So I think I hear what you're saying. So if you're in Century City and you're in one of the buildings, and on one floor is Merrill Lynch,
right,
private bank, the private bankers on that, and then below them might be Bel Air, right? But if you channelize, that means the guy calling them Merrill Lynch can't call them Bel Air, even though they're one floor apart. Basically the same buying behaviors.
Exactly.
Which is insanity. I've always felt that.
Yeah. Or even differently, the person leaves, XYZ broker dealer and starts their own RIA, and now somebody else has to pick them up in coverage because it's in a different channel.
So let me ask you this: Dakota, we don't change channel coverage.
We don't either.
Right? So you maintain the relationship for as long as you stay at the firm. How genius is that? It's so simple.
If we're going to focus on the end advisor as the most important thing, then why would we change coverage? Because they're now...
Our competition has like 4 or 5 different people over 2 years.
Yeah.
They just keep, our guys have been there for 10 years.
Exactly. So where it gets expensive though is if we were channelized, and your meeting with Bel Air cancels, and you're going to now try to get to another RIA meeting down in Orange County. You've been on the 405 in the middle of the day. You know how long it takes. It's impossible.
That's insanity. No way.
It's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So if you're not de-channelized and you walk out of that Merrill Lynch meeting and you say, okay, well now I can go see these firm downstairs. Call them up, see if they're open for coffee, whatever. Right. You can use your time so much more efficiently. So there's a couple markets where you can be channelized, and it doesn't cost you a lot. Midtown Manhattan or Manhattan in general. There's just a lot of advisors. There's a lot of channelization you can do, but outside of those couple markets, it's just really expensive to have people.
It's never made. We've always been generalists. It makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
But funny that how long that's gone on for.
I know.
And you spend all this money. It's completely inefficient. It frustrates people.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did that, but I think another part that I think we're very honest with ourselves is that we went to a straight de-channelized model. Segmented the advisors by how they operate versus how they what they call themselves or even what their name is on their business card. And we forced some segmentation into our business. We created 2 different groups of salespeople calling on these different segments of advisors. And what we found was that did also cause some conflicts that were unnecessary as well. So the changes we made in 2020 went de-channelized, forced segmentation by having forced teams differentiated, to changing last year to still de-channelized, but combining those teams into broader, bigger organizations. So 5-6 person teams focusing on a geographic area and then still doing a lot of the segmentation work, but just not forcing it by having the teams be separated. They're all now working together. So that's a big theme of us is teamwork. If the advisors are going to be driven by teams and we're going to go in as a sole practitioner, lone wolf, that's a mismatch. We have to have a team that can work together to solve the needs of the advisors. Now they all aren't going into the same meeting together, but they're interchangeable parts. They can swap in one person versus another depending on what the advisor is looking for, what their personality is. Maybe the junior analysts are being called on by our internal team, but the senior most people are being called on by our senior most salespeople. I mean, that kind of thing happens all the time. And so it's trying to be dynamic for what the advisor is looking for.
So I want to move on to communication, but I kind of just want to bookend. I just want to tie the knot here on your team concept around sales teams. Yeah. And if you can pull that off, it's the holy grail. As I said to our team 12, 14 years ago, when they were 2 individuals arguing over commission. And remember, we work with 6 investment firms. Mm-hmm. And I said, who cares the least about who gets paid at Dakota? Mm-hmm. And they're all perplexed. They're like, well, you or you? I said, no. Edgewood Management in New York City. Our client. Okay, our client. Yeah. They could care less at Dakota who gets paid anything. Right. They just want the money. Yep. Okay. So if you can get everyone to buy in to being selfless and part of the team and have all the incentives and everything, and you find those people, that's when the magic happens. Because really, all we're really about is covering accounts. And you can call them teams, you can call them whatever you want. Whomever the buyer, the investor is, who's covering that? Where do we stand? Are we in a current sales cycle? What's the current status? What's the next step? Right. Yeah. Right. I call it account coverage. Yeah. Now, switching gears to communication. Yep. So I believe every organization is a people organization, doesn't matter what it is. Yep. Thus, communication and how you communicate, share information. Specifically, could you help me understand, you as the distribution leader, how down, because I always hate the word down and up, but it's the only way to kind of best make it very vivid. Yeah. when you're looking lower, okay, at your team, and what's your communication structure there? Because I really want to emphasize I always think about our 1, 2, 3 person distribution teams who, really are the large majority, even though they're the small minority of kind of the entire investment business, how important communication is. And I think it's even more important for the smaller distribution teams, even for the bigger. But talk to me about how, Nuveen, and how you set up your communication structure.
Well, you remember back to my days at the startup, I was employee number 11 when we had 3 million under management. And I was located in San Francisco. The rest of the team was in Purchase, New York. And we were all trying to go after, trying to raise money in liquid alternatives and ETFs. I mean, in 2009. So it was a very difficult sale, at that time, right? But, the key of it was, in one level, we were fortunate because we were so small, because you could talk all the time to everybody in the company. And it was everybody wasn't in distribution. Like our CEO was really Adam Patty. He was very involved in distribution. The other distribution people were all very involved. But just like, what are the issues we're facing when we're out there talking to the advisors? It was really easy, but it's necessary. So our cadence at Nuveen is every Monday we have a Monday sales call. And our Monday sales call is, has an investment theme to it. But it always comes back to, what are the macro issues that are out there in the marketplace today that you should be, embracing to help uncover the issues the advisors face. And so that's another big theme that we talk about, is like, we're trying to solve the advisors' problems, and we can't solve their problems by pitching them a product. We actually have to find out what their issues, they have to tell us what their issues are. And the only way they tell us is if we ask good questions and then shut up and listen, right? And so every Monday we have our Monday sales call. Every week, our sales teams have a weekly pipeline call. And so to your point about communication, the pipeline call, in the early parts of this one, because we didn't really have a formal pipeline process back in 2018 and 17. It's something we instilled when I took over the organization.
Vital.
Absolutely.
Right.
It was crazy. Like, you're asking these salespeople, like, what do you think is going to come in? Like, where are the opportunities? Where are the biggest opportunities in your territory? And they're like, well, I'm working on this. I'm like, well, I got to have a little bit of context here. I mean, I need to know like what's really working and what's not. And so we use the weekly pipeline call as a communication tool. I mean, it's purely getting the teams together, looking at the opportunities, looking at their pipeline, and then determining what's happening against those pipeline opportunities, what needs to be elevated, what needs to be, kind of de-emphasized, who's picking up what, all of those things are critical to the communication process. And so we have divisional managers that are sitting on those pipeline calls, listening, giving feedback, pulling people aside and saying, hey, listen, you need to think about this, and asking probing questions, what have you. And then from there. So
before I just, for the audience and the listeners, just how important a pipeline call is, right? Because what I don't think people realize is, if you're a one-person sales group and you have to do a pipeline call and you force the meeting once a week with your boss, okay, it forces you to show up with the full pipeline. Otherwise, it's going to be very uncomfortable. So you have to put yourself in an accountable situation every single week. I get phone calls from good buddies saying, hey, after 12 months, this guy's put up a 0. It's just not working. I said, why? I said, well, how do the weekly updates go? And the pipeline calls, he goes, we don't do those. I said, well, that's core principle number 2 of the Dakota way. I said, that's how a salesperson protects himself from himself, or protects herself from herself. That's the only way to do it. Otherwise, and then you can say to everyone, it's like, look, we have a plan. Here's the plan. Here's how I'm doing against the plan. And we report weekly. And then you're having this back and forth, and everyone's aware this is what Guy's doing. Now, if you show up with 0 opportunities every single week, the boss is going to look at you like, dude, there's no pipeline for our pipeline review. So you're either going to get off the ice within the first week or two because it's not going to work, or you're going to change your behavior. So it's a forcing mechanism.
100%.
But the big takeaway is what you're doing. It's in the best interest of the salespeople and their career growth. That's what I'm getting at. That's the takeaway. So if you think you're avoiding it, you're actually crushing your career. Is my harsh takeaway.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the pessimistic salesperson would say, well, you're trying to manage me through pipeline, or you're trying to manage me through CRM. And it's like, well, listen, hold on. First off, I'm not trying to manage you at all. My goal would be to get out of your way, or to clear all the obstacles out of your way so you could go out and deliver. That's my goal. I don't want to manage you at all. But there's a communication process that I'm held accountable to as well. So I need you.
Can we talk about accountability for a second?
Absolutely.
There's no management, because I really think the management is the worst term in business.
I agree.
You're either leading or holding people accountable. right? For what they said they're going to be accountable for.
Right.
It's all you're saying to somebody. It's like, look, I can't run around. I'm going to treat you like an adult. I'm going to have some fun. Here are the 20 accounts you're responsible for. Each week, just walk me through where we stand and where we are in the pipeline, current status, next step.
Right. What did you do this past week to advance the opportunity? Bingo. It might not have been a meeting with the advisor, but you should be doing something every week, probably every day, if it's that important of a relationship, to advance it.
When we just completed our Dakota Way book, and I really wrote it with a huge soft heart for the turnover in our business. When you're messing with people's lives, you're messing with people's home life, constant turnover of salespeople.
Right.
I think it comes back to that one thing of clear accountability and reporting back against a plan.
I couldn't agree more.
That's simple, right?
Yeah.
And I just encourage everybody. It's like, especially if you're a 1, 2, 3 person sales team,
right?
Put yourself in that accountability, that transparency. And so you have to show up, you have to cover the account, or you got to leave.
For sure.
It's black and white.
No doubt.
Right.
Well, and the industry has evolved dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years, right? So I remember countless, especially when I moved from Smith Barney to the asset management side, going to, whatever, XYZ brokerage firms, national meeting where they bring all the partners in, and they would put a advisor up on the dais. And they'd ask the advisor, first question was always like, what do you expect from salespeople? And most of them would say, we don't talk to wholesalers. And we're really upset when the wholesalers, we have a good conversation and then there's no follow-up, which happens the majority of the time. And so my premise is like, there's just a lot of mediocrity in our business.
Yeah.
And, I think, those salespeople that are actually really talented, that are operating in the fashion that you and I are talking about, are going to be extremely valuable, even valued even more going forward.
Yes.
So, I agree that most people feel like these things are something that people are trying to hold over them, when in the reality, it's them holding themselves accountable. Yeah. And, we put out simple KPIs. We try to make sure there's only 3 or 4 key KPIs that we're looking at on a regular basis, because if you have too many, then they're all just noise. We look at, we use Tableau as a way to kind of display them to ourselves, so we're all looking at the same things on a real-time basis. And it's nothing's ever perfect, but at the very end, you're delivering on what you ask for. If you're actually communicating well and you're actually doing your job on a regular basis, these conversations should be pretty easy.
Yeah.
It's if you're not, and you don't know what to do, and you're not asking for any help, then that's where they get really problematic.
Okay, so the next, I want to get to how you manage up the executive committee, but I do want to close this out with a key takeaway.
Yeah.
So to me, what you're asking salespeople to do is in their best interest.
Yeah.
And that's what I do, right?
Yeah.
Say, this is in your best interest. Then I simply ask our team this question: walk me through why this is not in your best interest.
Right.
That's what I say.
Yeah.
In order to be successful in sales, I'm using broad numbers. You have to be in the 51st or greater percentile of your peer group to be successful in sales, right? Because it's all the stuff we're talking about, right? So we create infrastructure to help everyone fit into. You want to play on the PGA Tour? You have to be in the 1/10 of 1 percentile. And now with these reduced fields, if you've been reading recently, it's going to be probably another 1 percentile.
Right.
So, all you have to do is follow, essentially what we're talking on this call, our Rainmaker training, to basically be accountable to a plan, then execute against the plan. Right. And that's what you're getting at. So
absolutely.
Now, we could go on forever on this because it's one of my favorite topics, right? It's protecting ourselves from ourselves as salespeople. Let's move on to how because this is very important for salespeople of all shapes and sizes and numbers, reporting up to the quote unquote boss, executive committee, CEO, CIO, whatever that might be at your organization.
Yeah.
How do you go about that to make sure everyone's in the loop on a consistent basis?
Yeah, so we have quarterly operating reviews at a macro level where me and my boss, so I report into the global head of our client group, and he and I are also members of the senior management team of the organization. So every quarter we're educating the senior most leaders across the entire business about what's going on in distribution. It's not just a distribution conversation, but as you can imagine, it's how our performance of our funds are and how are we raising money is the most important thing. So we spend a lot of time every quarter with the senior management team going through what's happening, and almost all of it, the 90% of the conversation is the forecast on the pipeline. It's not really looking backwards, because everybody can see the report of what's happened. The CFO has already given an outline of our finances. It's all about looking forward. And so, every quarter we're doing that. Every month we're producing, reports, and to really make sure that people, whether it's the stakeholders across the organization, the heads of our investment teams, can see what's happening: activity, sales flows, pipeline growth, pipeline, kind of wins. Every time there's a big win, we publish meeting notes for the big engagements, and we publish those on a email distribution list so that everybody can see the activity with our largest client relationships.
Wow, gonna love that.
It happens in
sharing momentum.
Very much so. And
I think you have to share good news. You have to always share good news, even some of the small stuff.
I think that's a great thing about what I see happening as a part of our culture, is that when a win notification comes through on that email, the emails coming from their peers as well as from the senior most leaders of the organizations congratulating them on that is massive. Now, of course, everybody want to be on a phone call to do that, but doing it in real time in email, I think is equally important to talk through all those successes. So, I'd say it's a dynamic approach. I try to meet with the heads of our investment organizations on a regular basis, usually once a quarter on one-on-ones, to talk about like what's happening, what I need from them, what my challenges are, and ultimately get their buy-in for where we're going and what we're trying to do, because we're linked at the hip. If we're not working together, then we're working against each other, and we just can't have that to be successful.
So one of the foundational elements clearly is communication, as from where you come from. And again, it would almost be impossible for you to be in the role that you're in, right, without doing that. But again, let's not assume everyone thinks that way. Right. That communication is necessary. And I've seen with you now and time again, the distribution leaders value that. So
100%.
Tied to communication is one of my most favorite topics and leverage points, is the value of a CRM.
Yeah.
I just want to focus on the individual salesperson, right? So first off, just because I haven't asked you this question directly, even in the pre-call discussion, walk me through, just when I say CRM to you, what that means to you, to your business.
To me, it's a communication tool, and it's a pipeline tool. But to me, those are the two things that our CRM is for. And probably communication is first and foremost, because there's a lot of people they're going to be working on these accounts, and for their ability to go in and look at what's happening and be able to ascertain what's happened in the past
very quickly
is key. And then on the other side of it is it fuels our pipeline. We don't ask our sales teams to create a separate pipeline report. It all just comes out of the CRM with all the activity, all the information that goes along with it. So that's
genius.
Yeah.
Right. And now if you were running, let's go back to IndexIQ.
Yeah.
Now that listen, you might have already been doing this, but just have fun with me here. Now that and you said, hey, look, now you're going to go back to do a startup cap or IndexIQ. What would you do as that single salesperson head as it relates to CRM?
Oh, I would actually start. We used a spreadsheet back then.
Okay.
And I had my spreadsheet. My couple colleagues had their own spreadsheets, and we were just talking on the phone, kind of going through this thing. I would have a very well established CRM system that kind of captured the key information from every conversation we're having, and then had the reporting mechanism that could come out of it, that we all could look at it in real time of what's happening without having to get on a phone call and share information back. I mean, it's all right, good. So it's simple.
Right. So, and again, we could go forever, but the key takeaway here is the CRM runs your sales business.
Yes.
Without it, you'd be helpless.
Yes.
It's completely inefficient.
Yes.
And basically, it is a massive leverage point for all sales organizations if used very simply but properly.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the last number of years, as AI and all the other digital assistants are starting to come online, I've been thinking a lot more about, when I think about barriers, I'm just looking at how is the sales team using our CRM. Okay, if it takes them 8 clicks to get some information, I'm talking to the sales enablement team, is how do we get that down to 3 clicks? How do we get it to be automatic, just coming into their inbox as opposed to pushing the information? So when we made our changes in 2020, part of our premise was if we invested in a modern CRM, because we weren't using Salesforce back then, we were using a different mechanism. If we invested in a modern CRM and layered on top of it modern marketing, kind of tools and resources, we could probably get, a 10 or 15% productivity gains out of our sales team.
So just so everyone on this call knows, right, we're similar age.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
if we propose these basic sort of prima donna concepts of, hey, we really need this to be successful and communicate, would we maybe get a, hey, Kostin, why don't you just go back out on the road? How about, when I need your opinion, I'll ask for it, okay?
Wait, no. You want me to do this as opposed to talking to clients? Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, of course, I'm imitating some people that maybe maybe not in the industry any longer, but yeah, it's bananas. It's absolutely bananas, you know,
Right.
and the idea that, people shouldn't be, using this for their own good. If you're back to your point, I mean, this is all about their own good. It's impossible. When there's that many more clients than there are of us, how you are supposed to keep it all in track in your brain or on a spreadsheet without things falling through the cracks?
Well, it's part and parcel to talking to the client,
right?
Tracking the conversations, the meetings that you've done, so you can do rapid recall. Because if you're as good at talking to those clients, your brain's not big enough to manage 100 to 200 interactions in a quarter.
Exactly.
Give me a break. You need to have something you can go back and reference, right?
100%.
Right. I mean,
and that's what advisors are telling us. They want us to come into that next meeting and say, listen, given what you told me last time when we talked, right. These are the things that we walked away with that we're bringing to you today. Like,
did I tell you this last time?
Yeah, exactly. And when it's just starting all over again, no wonder the effectiveness rate is so low, is because you're basically starting the sales conversation almost over and over again all the time.
And there's so many tools now, from dictating and all the stuff, right? Translation, everything that can make that happen fast.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to close with 3 questions. First off, I want to talk about your leadership style, but I do want to weave in how you think about leadership.
Yeah.
You talked about the hiring process around education.
Yep.
Do you just want to touch on that? Because I know that was something important to you today that we just wanted to surface.
Well, I mean, so being a problem solver is all about thinking about what's in the needs of the advisor, right? And so we focus on education with advisors quite a bit. I mean, we feel we've been pretty successful growing our private markets business. We're one of the few public markets firms who have been able to actually grow a good sized private markets business side by side. We have a long way to go. We're not where we want to be.
Which is not easy, by the way, for a lot of these public equity firms.
It's hard. It's hard. And a lot of that is getting the advisor to rethink who they think about us. And that's a long process. But a lot of it is, the big power users aren't just going to automatically default to think about us. They've been using some of the other competitors for years, and then now they're bringing it further down in their books. And so we need to help broaden the universe. That's why the major kind of platforms like to engage with us, because our sales organization is consultative in nature. And we're going to broaden the base of advisors that are doing this business. And so educating and putting educational tools in their hands are really key. And it's also part and parcel of what we do for our sales team, because we want to educate them. We're going to spend a lot of time and energy. We have a kind of an education mindset of how we work with our sales teams. We want them to be the most effective people possible. So not only are the educational tools geared for the advisors and helping them, but they're also internally beneficial for our sales teams to better understand this marketplace, the issues, what's happening, so they can be even more conversant when they're actually engaging with clients. So education, I think, is a really, really key component to our success, but I think it's going to be important going forward for the industry.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's talk about your leadership style. So just give me a sentence or two on how you think about leadership, and really want to get down to how you think about treating people.
Sure. I would rather you ask some of my direct reports what my leadership style is, but the way I try to operate is.
By the way, we're all imperfect, so Jeff, okay, and it's always a work in progress
for sure.
It's the intent that you're going at leadership with, right?
And I would say that's, if there's one thing that my wife has instilled in me for the last 28 years we've been married, is there's continual self-improvement. Right?
Yes.
You have to be reflective, right?
1,000,000,000%, right? I mean, we're all not.
There's no way.
Come on.
Yeah.
We're all human beings.
So I like to set the tone for where we're trying to go. I mean, that opportunity when I was able to step away from the sales teams running the day-to-day and look back at the business, I do think that's something that allowed me to think broader about the industry. And so ever since then, I try to take as much time as I can afford looking a little further downstream. I try to build time in my calendar where I'm not focused on calls or anything. I just reading, observing the industry, talking to people outside the industry, talking to my peers across the street about what's happening, what they're seeing, just so I can look a little further downfield. So my leadership styles, I like to try to set the vision for where we're going to go. But then, when it gets down to actually making decisions, I want to get really diverse thought around the table, and I want to debate the issues. we have a saying around Nuveen is that you should challenge with respect. So you should always challenge ideas, don't challenge people. But if you challenge with respect, if you challenge an idea with respect, then you can get to a really good,
player, not the person.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can get to a good outcome.
Challenging the player, not the person.
Yeah. And then the other thing is,
that's really an important kind of takeaway, because it's like, it's all about how you position, right? The point, right? Where it's like, and if somebody feels safe, it's like, no, you're a great person. She's awesome. You're awesome. He's awesome. However you want to, right? But we're talking about the idea. And if we don't feel like we can have freedom of thought, as Alan Breed says at Edgewood, which is our large cap growth manager, he goes, when we're in the investment committee, okay, and this is the same concept.
Yeah.
He goes, I want everybody to be able to freely debate any company that we're looking at. He goes, however, if Guy brings up that he wants to buy Google, Jeff can't say, no, I hate it. Why? Because it has 2 O's.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
There has to be merit, right? Respectfully.
Right.
Right. But no, you're going at it, and it's like, look, there should be no sacred cows.
Right.
And it shouldn't be taken personally or attack the person. No, it's just the idea.
Yeah. And if we could build that kind of trust in the room, then there's no hallway heroes that are going to happen after the meeting is done, because they're going to raise all the issues in the meeting. We're going to have those discussions. We're probably not all going to agree, because if we agree on everything all the time, then I didn't put a good group of people around the table to really kind of debate the issues, right?
And by the way, you just said hallway heroes, and I had like kind of flash barfed because I just think, what you really identified in a very sweet, nice way is, backdoor politics,
absolutely,
and closed-end meetings and conference rooms,
totally,
which I think are the death knell
100%,
of a company.
100%.
Right? If people are talking constantly in this and that, it's like, no, it has to be an open forum, because we have to focus, number one, on the customer, our clients.
Yeah.
Right. And then number two, the teammates, or as I always say, one A is the teammates, because we take care of our teammates and we make life great for them, and they'll take care of the clients, if you will. That's where the energy needs to be. It can't be in this BS hallway heroes.
Right, exactly.
It's such a nice way of saying.
If you can't say it in the room in front of every one of your peers, then don't say it at all. Then, hold it off as your opinion. But now, if you're not fully bought into our approach, well, then that's a problem, because we can't agree on everything, but we have to execute all in the same way. You can't walk out and say, well, I didn't agree with that, so I'm not going to do it. You actually have to do it. Otherwise, you have to give us a good reason why you're not going to do it, so that we can debate that and get to the right answer.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives out west, and he took over a role at a school as the head of a school, right? And I simply said to him, I said, look, the only advice I can give you from a guy who's done a lot of startups is, if this person's name's Bill, okay, I said, everybody needs to be on team Bill of your executive committee, right? Your executive leadership team. You can't have any dissenters. Otherwise, you're going to spend 3 to 4 years, and your tenure might be 10, wasting time fighting. Right.
Yep.
You need everybody on the same wavelength, if you will. And if you can get that, that's like where the magic happens.
Yeah. Well, I talk a lot with my leadership team about too, is that you got to remember the hierarchy of teams. So you're on this team, and this is the most important team that you're on. You got to remember, I'm on another team. I'm on the team with my boss, and that's the most important team for me. I've got to deliver for him. Now, if you're coming to this team representing your team, and that's all you're going to do, well, then you're essentially a union leader. You're not part of our team. You have to be the person who's going to lead those individuals below you. Now, I need you to bring their points of view and all that to bear, but it can't be, well, you're just going to be the union rep coming to the table saying, this is what our demands are. That's not what team you're on. You're on the team here.
And that, I use the word vulnerability. It takes incredible vulnerability. Right. And I think it's happening more and more, but I don't think it's out there enough that people really have to believe they're not going to be taken advantage of. Right. Or, hey, if I share this, if I do this, right. You find those people that are strong but vulnerable like that and are just willing. You watch, they're like everybody wants to work for.
Well, so to your point about everything trickles down. My colleague Dimitri Stathopoulos would say, the fish rots from the head, not from the tail, right? And so, we talk a lot about on our team is if we're not operating as a cohesive team, debating these points, but all going in, to market with our teams separately but equally, then how do we expect them to do that? How do we expect them to work as a team and bring other people in and maybe in some cases be subversive to other individuals that are going to help the sales process, right?
Yeah.
We all want people who have strong egos and feel confident what they do, but their ego can't get in the way of success.
That's why I think the concept of mentorship is ridiculously strong, but I don't think it always has to be a one-on-one, once a week, once a month, what have you. I literally believe mentorship can be two people working the same organization on two different teams, the younger person observing the older person, how they behave. And that's the mentorship.
Yeah, that's how I did it.
They don't have there's not one conversation about like how to do things, but you're just observing.
Yeah.
And then you're following the lead of the great leader, right?
For sure.
Absolutely. All right, so 2 more questions, because
Yeah.
this dovetails beautifully into a lot of young people want to get into this business.
Yeah.
Maybe more on the private side today than the public equity side, but nonetheless, what advice would you give to a young person? Let's specifically speak sales, getting into our industry today. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I would say you should do it. First off and foremost, it's the most fascinating and rewarding, both personally and professionally, and economically in many cases, kind of role you can have being in the sales organization. I would absolutely do it. And it doesn't mean you don't have to come from people that in your family tree that are in that. Just take it from a guy who, my dad was a construction worker. Like he was not anywhere, nobody in my family was connected to this. And if you come at it with the right attitude and approach and observe and be a student of the business, you can go very, very far. So I would say absolutely do it. But I think the thing about it is for young folks, they need to be actively engaged in everything they do. I would read obsessively. I would, listen to, now there's a lot more opportunities like this, listening to podcasts that weren't available 25 years ago when, we started in the business, and really absorb as much as you can and be actively engaged. Every meeting that you're in, you should be actively engaged. That doesn't mean try to speak up at every meeting. That means it could be just take really good notes and then start watching others and seeing how they operate and ask good questions. I think that is the key, is like absorbing as much as you possibly can, really digesting that. The other thing I would say is have patience. Many young people in this business want to be the kind of the big, asset raiser in year 2 or year 3. In many cases, switch jobs for, in many cases, many reasons, the wrong reasons. I tell people all the time, I say, listen, if you want to leave and go to another company, you should. I mean, this is an open forum. You should go to where you think your most highest and best use is going to be. I'll be honest. I'll tell you if I think it's a bad idea or not. Don't take it that I'm trying to keep you here. I'm just going to give you my honest opinion. If it's a great job, a great opportunity, I will say, you know what? You should take that job.
Well, can we just, longevity, in my opinion, in a company, in a role, drives long-term success.
100%.
I think it takes a long time to get mastery. The more you have, you're in an environment where you're continuously learning and growing. You think you have it mastered after a year or 2, 3, and then you don't realize, right? So you're 5, 6, 7, but there's that consistency, how to get a job done, right? All those things that, number one, is so hard to replace for us when we have our best teammates.
Right.
But conversely, if you stay long enough where you really, truly can master. Now, it's up to the firm also to provide that career growth, the unbridled career growth, and you're not going to be able to do it for everybody. Yeah. But I think longevity to me is everything in a career, just simply because I did 14 jobs in my first 17 years. So, and that's like a public thing. It's embarrassing because I added 8 and my kids go, Dad, just go through that one more time. They're like, we think you left 6 off. What about that job? Oh yeah, I forgot that. Oh yeah, that too. So that's kind of why we created Dakota, is to create longevity, where people can get slotted in and have a long-term great career and continuously grow.
For sure.
Okay, those are great insights for what. So one of the toughest questions I'm going to ask you, and I know I prepped you a little bit for this. So to close, there's a lot going on in our industry. Every distribution leader is faced with challenges. For you, what's your biggest challenge currently, and how are you going about solving it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge is hiring and retaining great people, because it is an arms race out there today. And I sorry to interrupt you, but I really want your opinion on this, because I want to unpack. I wish somebody told me this with a slap across the face years and years and years ago. A players want to play with A players. So you just said attracting great talent, but can you help the audience understand that's in every business book, that's in every book, that's in every blog post, but
can you unpack the real meaning of that? Because that's where I think you were going, right? Hiring the best, but there's also this corollary between you and I. Like, if you're going to sort of compromise on a B, even though the B might be an A doing something else, but at your organization, Nuveen.
Yeah, you're hitting something like really comes to roost, because the A players look around the room and they'll say, wait a minute, so I'm holding myself to this level of accountability, and that person is not. Like, then, and you guys are giving them it's okay, then that's a problem. So, and I don't think there's a limited pool of unbelievable talent out there. I think there's actually a developable pool of unbelievable talent. But, we talk a lot about, like, we can't want it more than the salesperson does, right? If they want to work hard and they want to get after it, and they're going to be, adaptable to suggestions and coaching, then we're going to create all kinds of opportunity for that person to grow and thrive and put them in spots for them to be able to be successful. If they're not open to that and they don't want to be part of a team, and when I interview every person that comes into the organization, I don't do all the interviews, but I usually do the last interview with everybody that's in a sales role in the organization. And I spend 30 minutes with them, and I want to get two things from them. I want to get to know how they think and what motivates them. And I also want to get from them, or give to them, how we operate. Yeah. And what I tell them, I say, listen, this place isn't for everybody. If you want to be part of a team and you're going to be equally comfortable, being in front of the room and owning the situation as you would be in the back of the room and letting somebody else lead for you, then this is going to be a good place for you. But if you have to be the person who's the smartest person in the room all the time, that lone wolf that's out there trying to kind of, drag down every deer that you can see, you're probably not going to do well here, because we have such a complex organization. There's no way you're going to handle it all. And it's fine. If that's not for you, then there's plenty of other organizations out there where you may do well. And so, that to me, it's not so much just finding and retaining great talent. It's making sure that we have the right people in every seat, and making sure that they feel that they have as much room on the upside to grow as possible.
And what you're getting at is the challenge is hiring, but then also making sure people are bought into the Nuveen way of doing things.
100%. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, we talk a lot about the Nuveen way. We talk about it's a team organization, but we're a team that's built to win. We want to win. Oh, yeah. We're not here for just, having fun and games. We want to win. We just want to win the right way. We want to have a durable winning process. When you look at some of those championship teams that transcend time, the dynasties that you're saying, okay, well, what was it about them that made them unique? Whether it's the All Blacks from, kind of the top level rugby for decades was the top team in the world, or, the Niners in the 80s, the Patriots in the 2000s. There's something about those teams and their organizations and how they operate that makes them repeatable winners. And that's what we're trying to focus on. If we have teammates that want to be a part of that, then they'll have a long and illustrious career at Nuveen. If they don't want to be a part of that, well then, it's probably best for them to find another spot.
Well, because at the end of the day, by doing that, what you're getting at is it creates low agita. I always feel that the lower the volatility at whatever I'm doing at Dakota, the lower the vol and the higher focus on execution and low vol makes the whole environment 100%. So much fun, right? Yeah. It's fun to come to work when you're not just constantly bickering. You're focusing on selling, growing, coaching, the whole thing.
So our good buddy Ken Hudson is probably the embodiment of this. So he's not in my organization. He is in the institutional world. But being a Taft-Hartley salesperson, there's a lot of financial advisors at the big wires that sell into Taft-Hartley, and so the crossover happens all the time. And he is the first one to call up to say, hey, listen, there's an opportunity for your guys. Let's get this going. And how can I help? And I'm like, Kenny, whatever you need, just let me know. And like, it's that kind of person. If we had, so I have a 220 person organization, about 125 salespeople. If I had 125 Ken Hudsons on my team, I mean,
Huddy's the king, baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's as good as they get. That's for
great.
Sure. Well, it's a great plug. Yeah. And no, he'd be the guiding light for anybody to aspire to, right? His style. Not agree more. That's great. Well, Jeff, this has been such a pleasure having you on board, having you on the show. I mean, what a blast. I can't thank you enough.
Oh, this is, we could do this for 10 more hours. This is such a good time.
There's so many topics. I had to just move on because otherwise we would never finish. But this has been awesome. All right. Well, everyone, that's another wrap of the Rainmaker Podcast. Jeff Carlin, rockstar, Nuveen. Now you can kind of see why a guy like Jeff and these different people we've had on the podcast are so successful. He outlined so many core principles of the way we all think to build successful distribution organizations. So That's a wrap. Thanks so much for joining, and I can't wait to see you in the next Rainmaker Podcast.
You can find this episode and others on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. We are also available on YouTube if you prefer to watch while you listen. If you would like to check up on past episodes, check out our website, dakota.com. Finally, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, please be sure to like, follow, and share these episodes. We welcome all your feedback as well. Thank you for investing your time with Dakota.
Hey, thanks so much for joining Rainmaker Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the show, enjoyed the interview. I know I loved it. And hey, if you wake up in the morning and you raise money for an investment firm, you do cold outreach, whether you're a sales leader or salesperson, and you don't know about Dakota Marketplace, we would love to show it to you. It's world-class. It's used by over 880 investment firms and over 3,600 individual salespeople. To learn more, go to dakota.com and click on a free trial.